Kevin Gibbons, you expect that he'll get the end this week?
Yeah. I hope so.
Hey James, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Your first-time starters and the true freshmen who play now one game under their belts at home. What's the challenge now for those guys going into what's going to be most likely a hostile environment Saturday night?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There's one time there's one thing to have your first game at home, and there's a different experience to go on the road. So we'll make practice as hostile as we possibly can. But it's going to be different. I do think that first game probably is still the biggest challenge. But going on the road has factors to it as well. So we'll make practices as loud and as challenging as we possibly can. We'll show them video. We'll show them clips. And we'll show them, give them the best examples we possibly can of what to expect, what it's going to be like there. I also think, with it being in the state of Pennsylvania, though, that I think we'll get a good percentage of Penn State fans there. We travel usually pretty well, and obviously it makes it easier to travel, in the state. So I think we'll have good support here.
James, do you feel you guys are coaching as aggressively with the leads that you've built? You've built a lot of big leads over the last, say, year and a half. And then teams have been able to come back on it. As you self-scout, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I think we could be more aggressive, in those settings. It's interesting because you make both arguments. People say, well, you should be more aggressive offensively. Well, for us in our offense, that's throwing the ball. But then you got other people that are going to be critical because they're saying in 4-minute offense you should be running the ball more, but that's not really our style of offense. That's not how we do things. So I think you have to be careful in how you're interpreting aggressive. I think defensively, yeah, I think we could have used some more aggressive blitz packages and things like that, and we've discussed that the last couple of days. So yeah, I think that's a fair criticism. But I also think make sure that the criticism is coming from a perspective of 2018 football and the style of offense we play. So I think that's where we got it on offense. When we get to 4-minute situations, we can't lose our identity and try to now become something we're not in that situation. So that was a big all-season study and conversation, and still talked about on Saturday. Excuse me, on Sunday.
2 years ago, you went into Pitt with a younger, or at least starts-wise, inexperienced defense. How do you translate those skills, or those lessons learned from 2 years ago, where your team struggled with the shifts and the motions and the jet sweeps, to this new defense that has a couple of fresh faces and some players that haven't experienced that yet?
Yeah, well, obviously, we learned from that experience. The challenge is, in our old offensive system, one of the things that I really liked about that is we ran a system that had an H-back or fullback, however you want to make it. I probably should have said fullback because the message boards and everything would go crazy. But an H-back that could fill that type of role. So we could line up in 21 type sets, we could line up in 12 personnel type sets, we could line up in 11 personnel sets, we could line up in 10 personnel sets, we could line up in empty. So although I don't know if we were in position to do that the way I would have liked to do it with where our offensive line was at that point, I really felt like that's the things that we had done pretty well in our previous institution, Vanderbilt. Is our offense maybe was never record-setting, but it was really good for our team to play great team football, which is really ultimately all we want to do. It's not about offensive records or defensive records. It's about or special teams. It's about playing great team football. So running that style of offense allowed our defense to pretty much see everything that they were going to see throughout the year. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So when we made the change and went to the spread style offense, you've got to be really disciplined now that your defense gets enough work during spring ball, during training camp, and throughout the entire year that you're getting enough 12 personnel and 21 personnel work. Because if you think you're going to be able to go from only seeing spread and prepare for a pro-style offense that's going to line up and pound you in a week's period of time, that's challenging. No different if you're going to play an option team. You can't wait till that week to prepare. I think that's one of the things, if you look at Georgia Tech, with that series, Georgia's always been really smart. What do? They always scheduled Georgia Southern the week before Georgia Tech. Why? To get them really 2 weeks of option work before that game. So you got to be really disciplined. No different on offense. We don't see a whole lot of odd front defense from our defense. So we got to mix that in during camp on our own, because once again, you want your players comfortable and confident playing that style of defense, whether they've seen it a whole lot or not. So I think that's one of the things that I think is really important to us, is it's never going to be about setting records on defense or setting records on offense or setting records on special teams. It's going to be about playing great team football to allow us to be successful. And that's where our focus is. If records come, beautiful, that's a byproduct of the other things that we're doing, but that's never our goal.
You've got 3 new assistants this year, which is the most you've had in a single season as a head coach, be it here or at Vanderbilt. Or if you count Ricky doing something different than he has been. How does that change in-game oversight from your perspective and in-season evaluation as you go?
Yeah, I think it changes a lot. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think, it's a little bit of the nature of the beast in college football now, so you have to just embrace it and make the best of it. But I also think that's where it is very important for us to try to limit that as much as we possibly can. And the administration's been very supportive of that. We got to continue to do that. I think that's going to be critical, because obviously the more years that we're all together, the better. The players aren't having to build new relationships with their position coaches. The recruits aren't having to build new relationships with the recruiting coaches. The staff knows how I'm going to be on the fourth quarter against App State from 105,000 and lose the lead late in the game. I know how they're going to react when times get tough and adversity hits, because it's easy when things are going well. It's how do you all work together? What's the communication like? I think you guys have heard me talk about this before. It's like a family. And every time your family goes through adversity and you get through that adversity, you become stronger. And it's no different than with a football team. It's no different in the locker room with the players. It's no different with the staff. So, we were able to get through some adversity on Saturday. We'll grow from that. Players will grow, coaches will grow, the organization will grow as a whole. But I think that's a fair point. There's probably some things that happened that I addressed during the game, that I addressed after the game, and then I addressed on Sunday in the meetings, and then slept on it and addressed some more things on Monday to make sure that there's no gray area and everybody completely understands kind of how we do things and why. And as much as we cover those things in off season, there's always going to be things that come up on game day that you haven't necessarily covered in the detail that you need to.
James, did any of those 8 true freshmen you used the other day make a particular impression on you? And would you be reluctant to use any of them again this coming weekend?
No, actually the opposite. I think I said that earlier. I think we probably should have played those guys more, not just the freshmen, but all those guys starting for the first time. And I'd like to see that again on Saturday. But as you know, we grade the tape, and some guys' play is going to warrant less reps, and some guys' play is going to warrant more reps. I don't think there was a guy that really kind of stood out in either direction, except for the guys that are already probably starting for us, like Penn and Checo and guys like that.
Hey James, how are you?
Hey.
Good. Hey, question. What do you see from Kenny Pickett that you like? And also, too, on the second part of that, stopping their defense ends. What do you guys have to do to contain those two defense ends?
Yeah, I think a couple things. He is bigger than you think. He is much more athletic and mobile than you think. You've seen that time and time again. And then obviously he's been able to step up and play big in big games. So I think he's earned a lot of respect from us. I think he's earned a lot of respect regionally and nationally. He can make the throws that he needs to make. He's got enough mobility to keep you honest. Those things not only in the pocket, but also break in the pocket. Seems to have a good feel for the game, as well. So I've been impressed with him. I think he's just going to continue to get better and better the more he plays. And then their defensive ends, I think last time we were there, I think their defensive end was probably the biggest difference maker in the game. I think he changed the game single-handedly. Was, I thought, one of the better defensive players that we saw that entire season. I think these defensive ends are long and athletic and are disruptive and make plays. I think we got some guys in practice that we go against that are probably similar, but it's going to be a challenge. I think they do some things with their 3 down front on 3rd and 6 or more that creates some challenges as well. We typically do a pretty good job of studying those things. And then there's going to be some things that come up in this game that we haven't prepared for. If you look at Coach Narduzzi, he typically, just like he did last year against Youngstown State, plays very vanilla in game 1 and has some things that he's going to show in game 2, and especially in a game like this, that he hasn't shown. So that's where you got to, trust your training, your fundamentals, and your techniques, and your rules, because there's going to be a few things that come up that we haven't seen or expected. And then obviously that fullback got a lot of attention from us, I guess, however you want to say, 2 or 3 years ago. And he's back after missing last year, so I know he's going to be a big part of what they do as well.
Time for 2 more, I'll start with Mike.
How do you assess the performance and involvement of Juwan and DeAndre?
Yeah, I think Juwan has a few plays that he'd like to have back. But he also made some big plays that there's not too many humans on the planet could make. The corner route in between the safety and the corner, they're both converging on the ball. Trace throws it up to a 7-footer, and he goes up and gets it, comes down with contact from both sides. So I think that was kind of the first step for him, and he'll continue to evolve. I thought DeAndre did some good things, especially in the return unit as the punt returner. A few balls got to the ground. I would love to see him, catch an air, because you never know once the ball gets to the ground where it's going to go or who it's going to hit, things like that. And I think we've seen DeAndre make huge plays for us over the last 2 to 3 years, and I think that will continue to evolve. As you guys know, there's going to be some games where guys get a bunch of touches based on opportunities and what the defense is trying to take away. If I had to imagine, DeAndre and Juwan are going to get some opportunities this week, because there's going to be some packages where they're going to try to take away KJ, obviously based on what he did in week 1. So each week it's going to be different based on what the defense is trying to do and what the defense is trying to limit. And no different than anything else in life, when you try to take one thing away, it creates other opportunities. So you'll see that. You'll see some weeks where we run the ball for 200 yards. You'll see other weeks where we run the ball for 100 yards. You'll see some weeks where we throw for 450 yards. You'll see other weeks where we throw for 250 yards. You'll see some weeks where some guys, catch 150 yards, receiving yards, and you'll see other weeks where they may not get a catch. It just depends on what the defense is trying to do that week and how we're attacking it.
James, you mentioned in your opening statement, Pitt corner Dane Jackson. If he plays, is that the guy that kind of stands out to you in that secondary that really improved over the latter half of the season last year?
I think it's a guy that they have a lot of confidence in from everything we have seen and read. That they feel like is their top guy. So obviously, it's going to be a challenge.